They sing songs of military and religious fervor in support of a homeland for Palestinians. The words translate to, "In my heart I have faith, and in my hands a Kalashnikov," a Soviet machine gun. The U.S. and its allies continue to insist that Saddam Hussein withdraw his troops from Kuwait, and then the Western nations may talk about a Palestinian homeland. So far, Iraq has not taken the bait. Greg Lefebvre, CNN, Amman.
Iraq reportedly has high explosive devices, the equivalent of small nuclear bombs. The LA Times says the U.S. has no ready defense against the weapon called fuel-air explosives. They can be launched as bombs from airplanes or as warheads on missiles and reportedly create a huge fireball and shockwave over a concentrated area. Israeli troops shot and killed a Jordanian soldier tonight after he crossed into northern Israel. Israeli radio says the man was armed with a knife. It's the second time this year Israeli forces have killed a Jordanian soldier. Another military uprising in the Philippines ends in defeat. Colonel Alexander Noble surrendered early Saturday morning after a two-day revolt on the southern island of Mindanao. The government says Noble gave up because his rebellion did not spread to Manila. Noble is a former officer in Corazon Aquino's Presidential Guard. This was the 7th military rebellion in Aquino's 4-year rule. The streets of Kigali, Rwanda are quiet tonight after an attempted coup. Yesterday, Belgium sent 110 paratroopers to its former colony to protect the 1,600 Belgians there. They arrived today to help Rwandan and French forces fight a group of rebels from the country's minority tribe. Diplomats say that situation is now under control. Now that a federal judge has given his okay, the Space Shuttle Discovery is scheduled to lift off in about 8 hours from now. Fueling is scheduled to begin in just a few minutes. The leaks have grounded the shuttle fleet since May, and anti-nuclear activists have tried to stop this launch, contending the plutonium-powered satellite Ulysses could be dangerous in a Challenger-type accident. 2 Live Crew band member Luther Campbell says he knew Charles Freeman was going to be found guilty. The Florida record store owner was convicted of obscenity on Wednesday for selling a 2 Live Crew album after a federal judge in Florida had ruled it obscene. Freeman says he was found guilty because the all-white jury couldn't understand the music. Campbell agrees.
When I first saw how the jury was and what jury they picked it and how they picked the jury, I automatically said that this guy's going to get railroaded. You know, and I wasn't surprised at all. I had said, you know, earlier that day when they told me how they picked the jury and there was no blacks on the jury, there was no blacks in the jury pool, you know, I say, hey, he's dead.
Freeman could get up to a year in jail and a $1,000 fine. Photographs, not music, were the center of a much-publicized obscenity trial in Ohio, and today a Cincinnati art gallery and its director were cleared of obscenity charges for displaying 7 controversial Robert Mapplethorpe photos. Ed Garston reports.
The prosecution said the First Amendment had nothing to do with it. The defense argued the guarantee of free speech had everything to do with it. It was the case against the Cincinnati Contemporary Art Center and its director Dennis Barry on obscenity charges for displaying 7 photos by the late Robert Mapplethorpe in an exhibition of his work last spring. The jury took about 2 hours to come up with its decision.
We, the jury in this case, being duly impaneled and sworn, do find the defendant not guilty of pandering obscenity.
The Mapplethorpe photos caused a ripple in the nation's capital when the Corcoran Gallery attempted to show them last year. The gallery ultimately bowed to public pressure, and another museum showed them instead. But they went on to Chicago and Hartford, Connecticut without incident. But when they hit conservative Cincinnati, the law moved in and charged Barry and the Art Center with obscenity and illegal use of a minor in displaying some of Mapplethorpe's photos. The saying, "There's no sin in Cincinnati," drew new breath. The courthouse steps, the scene of almost daily demonstrations. Dennis Barry said last spring he never dreamed the case would reach trial, but it did. Now his trials are over, as well as worries for museum and gallery directors around the country.
We did something very important in this city. We stood up for the First Amendment. Those 8 jurors knew what it was all about. They knew what freedom is all about, and they exercised their rights as individuals and Americans and stood up for that freedom.
It's a signal to everybody that before they start shutting down museums and telling people what they can say and what they can see, they better realize that there's a protection out there.
Prosecutor Frank Prouty said he wasn't necessarily disappointed in losing the case. In fact, he said he's relieved the issue is finally settled.
In terms of the jury has made a decision, and that's the decision.
Dennis Barry says when the charges were first filed last April, it opened the door to every museum in America to this type of legal action. Now he says those doors are closed and museums are open once again to protection from the First Amendment. Ed Garston, CNN, Cincinnati.
Residents of Burton, Michigan spent the day cleaning up after a destructive tornado. The twister touched down in the Flint suburb last night, cutting a path about 4 houses wide and 1.5 miles long. Officials say one house, several stores, and some motor vehicles were damaged. There were no deaths reported. Heavy rains from Hurricane Klaus are causing floods on the Caribbean island of Martinique and worry on other islands in the storm's path. Klaus right now is located 250 miles southeast of Puerto Rico. It has maximum sustained winds of 75 miles an hour. The Antigua floods have left 6 people dead and 1,500 homeless. The storm threatens many resort islands and could threaten the southeastern United States by next Wednesday. Up next in headline consumer news, Charles Keating says he didn't do it.
Some early season snow materializes in the mountains of Wyoming and Montana this weekend, and behind the cold front, temperatures drop dramatically. But Indian summer-type weather prevails for most of the eastern seaboard.
This is CNN Headline News. The Navy's Blue Angels. The Army's Golden Knights. The Air Force Thunderbirds. Just a show of precision aerial maneuvers and flawless parachuting. It's a demonstration of professionalism, the spirit of America's armed forces.
Ursus horribilis, the grizzly bear, the most feared animal on the North American continent, and now precariously near extinction. They are surprisingly graceful for creatures so huge and powerful. Grizzlies are also extremely playful, highly intelligent, and though they seem rather slow-moving, they can be remarkably swift and dexterous. The grizzly bear, an American legend.
America's jobless rate is the highest it's been in 2.5 years. On Friday, the Labor Department reported September's unemployment rate climbed 0.1% to 5.7%. That's the third straight monthly rise. Economists say that's more evidence of an impending recession. The former owner of the failed Lincoln Savings and Loan says he is innocent. Charles Keating and 3 co-defendants entered not guilty pleas at their arraignment Friday on charges of bilking investors. Bob Dunn reports.
A somber and silent Charles Keating stepped from a sheriff's van in jail garb and with his hands manacled to appear in court for arraignment on a 42-count criminal indictment for fraud in connection with the sale of junk bonds through his Lincoln savings. Keating, without a coat and wearing an open shirt, managed to smile in the courtroom before he and his 3 co-defendants were asked by the prosecutor to enter a plea.
Absolutely not guilty.
The other defendants also pleaded not guilty, and the case was assigned for trial. As he left, Keating waved to one of his daughters, who was in the courtroom, but she refused to talk to reporters as she left by a back stairway. While the other 3 defendants are free on bail, Keating remains in jail with bail at $5 million. His attorney is doing everything possible to gain his release, including an appeal to the state Supreme Court.
What's Mr. Keating's state of mind in jail right now? He is looking forward to the opportunity to have a full, fair trial of the charges that have been brought against him here, and he is looking forward to being vindicated following that trial.
Prosecutors say nearly 17,500 bondholders lost a total of $250 million on junk bonds, mostly sold at Lincoln Savings branches in California. The indictment, however, lists only 20 victims who lost a total of $1.2 million. The prosecutors say they limited the scope of the case to make it easier for the jury to follow. Each of the defendants could face 10 years in prison. The next scheduled court appearance for Keating and the other 3 defendants is Monday, October 15th. Meanwhile, Charles Keating's bail remains at $5 million, and he is still in jail. Bob Dunn for CNN, Los Angeles.
Will the Russian bear rule a future Moscow Wall Street? A delegation from the New York Stock Exchange is headed to Moscow to teach the Soviets how to create, operate, and regulate a financial market. Exchanges have been outlawed in the Soviet Union since the communists took over 70 years ago, but market-style reforms are trying to revive a battle-scarred economy there. Wall Street had the budget blues on Friday morning. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted 60 points on news that Congress had rejected a budget plan. But the market recovered most of its losses. The Dow closed down 6 points in moderate trading. More war anxiety, meanwhile, pushed oil prices up more than $1 a barrel on Friday. On the New York Mercantile Exchange, American benchmark crude jumped $1.06 to close at nearly $38 a barrel for November delivery. In international trading, North Sea crude climbed $1.20 up to $37.35 a barrel for November delivery. Well, the backyard barbecue could be the thing of the past in Southern California. On Friday, the Air Quality Board ordered makers of charcoal lighter fluid to find a cleaner burning product by 1992 or face a ban. It says oil-based lighter fluids and self-starting briquettes contribute to the smog problem. Gas barbecues and electric starters would be exempt from that ban. Some baseball playoff action from Cincinnati up next in CNN Headline Sports.
This is CNN Headline News.
I think the average person doing my intersection would be probably scared to death. As bad as it can get, that's how I like it, because then it becomes a challenge. Once the cars are blocking every lane possible, and it's my job to get out there and straighten it out and keep everything moving, and it becomes a challenge.
Damn, this traffic jam. How I hate to be late. It hurts my motor to go so slow. Damn, this traffic jam. Time I get home, my supper be cold. Damn, this traffic jam.
Then when the opportunity arose, I took it because I knew I could do it. And I've just excelled at being a traffic officer. And now I really enjoy it.
This newspaper is read and respected the world over. Thousands turn to it daily for articles by writers such as William F. Buckley, Jr., Mike Royko, George Will, writers who have been honored with journalism's highest awards. People turn to this newspaper to be informed and entertained. They seek the advice of Ann Landers or Dear Abby and the wit of Irma Bombeck. Is this newspaper the New York Times or the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune or the LA Times? No. This newspaper is Stars and Stripes, published especially for you. Subscribe to Stars and Stripes. It's your newspaper.
This is Ron Hyde, CNN Headline Sports. Cincinnati avoided going to Pittsburgh down 2-0 by winning Game 2 of the NLCS Friday afternoon in Riverfront, 2-1, as Tom Browning outdueled 22-game winner Doug Drabeck. And it was purely a case of Paul O'Neill, offensively and defensively. O'Neill's RBI double in the 6th inning brought home the go-ahead run. And in the top half of the inning, O'Neill contributed a stellar defensive gem, gunning down Andy Van Slyke at third base for a double play, halting a Bucks rally. The series is tied at 1 game apiece. Game 3, Monday at Three Rivers.
You hope these things happen and you hope you can come through. That's part of baseball, but they don't always work that way, so you really got to enjoy these times. And, I'm as happy as I can be right now winning this game.
Saturday night at Fenway, it's Game 1 of the American League Championship Series as the world champion A's tackle the Red Sox in a rematch of the '88 encounter won by Oakland. 22-game winner Dave Stewart goes up against Boston's 21-game winner Roger Clemens.
They have a great ball club. They have speed, they have power, they have everything, they have pitching, everything. This means but they are human beings. This means we are human too. I think when we go to play 7 games, anything can happen.
Cincinnati Bengals head coach Sam Wyche was fined $30,000 by Commissioner Paul Tagliabue on Friday for denying a woman reporter access to the Bengals locker room following a loss this past week in Seattle. It's the largest fine ever levied against an NFL coach. Friday night gave fans just 1 game in the NHL in the season opener for both teams in Landover. Pittsburgh's Kevin Stevens scored 2 goals and assisted on 4 others for 6 points as the Pens dumped the Capitals 7-4. Ron Hyde, CNN Headline Sports.
This is CNN Headline News.
You're a grand old flag, you're a high-flying flag, and forever in peace may you wave. You're the emblem of the land I love. You're a grand old flag, you're a high-flying flag, and forever in peace may you wave. You're the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. Every heart beats true under red, white, and blue, and never a foe or rag. Until old and brave and be forgotten, keep your eye on the grand old flag.
This salute to the flag has been brought to you by more than 200 million Americans.
Some folks in Meridian, Mississippi are going around in circles trying to assure that their world record isn't easily broken. Thursday was their record 13th straight day riding a carousel, and they'll continue until Sunday just for good measure. And they'll likely wind up in the 1992 edition of the Guinness Book of Records. The 91 edition has some 3,000 new records in its debut on Friday. An attempt to break the most people dancing at the same time record fell a little short on Friday, so a couple of thousand young people in San Francisco held a big party instead. The dance is part of the Navy's Youth Excellence Day ceremonies. Actress Mimi Rogers says her latest movie role was a difficult one. She's starring in the new film Desperate Hours. Melanie Blank reports.
Michael Bosworth is looking for a place to call home. Just for a few hours.
In Desperate Hours, Mimi Rogers plays Nora Cornell, a suburban housewife who, along with her family, is terrorized and held hostage by an escaped psychopathic criminal.
And being held hostage, and you're trapped. You can't go outside. Your range of motion is completely cut off.
For Rogers, that feeling became real after the camera stopped rolling.
We were there every day, day after day, 6 days a week for 6 or 7 weeks. And you do start to develop that sense of claustrophobia.
The actress, who prefers to move around in her personal life, found the role difficult.
I really didn't have very much to draw on. How many times can you think of in your lifetime when you've experienced a really deep terror, a fear for your life?
So Rogers sought the assistance of the movie's director, Michael Cimino.
He gave me a lot of material to read, you know, psychological studies and profiles and case histories and accountings of what had occurred in different hostage situations and the kind of syndromes that people experience.
She was surprised to find that fear wasn't the only emotion a hostage feels.
It's much more complex than that. You know, you succumb, you fight back, you kind of go numb, you come alive again, you give up, you reverse that.
I hold you responsible for everything that's happened to him. He kept his word.
Rogers says because of the subject matter and the actors involved, that there was at times a fear that things could get out of control and that tensions remained high during most of the shooting.
You have to maintain a level of emotion and tension, and you know, you can't help it. You feel a little raw and bruised, and you know, you're experiencing all this.
Audiences can experience it as well at theaters beginning this weekend. Melanie Blank, CNN Entertainment News, Hollywood.
And finally, a story of fleeting wealth. Last month, a temporary clerical worker in Pennsylvania deposited $132 into her money market account. But the bank accidentally credited her with more than $7.5 million. Elizabeth Schilling says she recognized the error the next day, but so did the bank. Schilling admits to dreams of mega wealth, but says she never seriously considered trying to withdraw that windfall. And that's our report for this half hour. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bob Losure. Around the world in 30 minutes. This is CNN Headline News.
Bravo's orange.
This is CNN Headline News.